Hello and good morning. It's day 9 on the LJL. We're in the second round robin and games are heating up. Places are starting to be decided, but we still have a while left. But there's going to be an exhilarating game as always. But let's introduce the squad for today. I'll be your host. I'm J-Real. We're joined by Formal here and RMC. Guys, how are you doing today?
I'm Go ahead. Oh, okay, I've just got a little echo weird. But yeah, no, we're doing all right. Look, I'm a little bit offended already that you're saying good morning. It's 7 p.m. in the evening right now. I have dinner waiting for me, and you're just waking up. Come on, man. I thought you were hype and ready for today.
No, indeed. It is early doors here in the UK. RMC, how are you feeling? Obviously, it's even earlier where you are.
2 a.m., baby. Let's go. 2 a.m. I am awake and ready for this J-Reel. The fact that I'm here at 2 a.m. tells you that, as ever, I'm hyped for the LJL.
It's fine. Well, it looks bright outside your kitchen, so it's all well and good. And right now, it's cooled down a little bit in the UK. I don't know if you guys know, but it's been very, very, very hot for, well, the UK at least. It's been too hot. But these games are about to rise this temperature back. We're kicking it off with AXZ versus Rascal Jesters, which was a huge upset on day 2. This was not the expected outcome that we thought was going to occur. RMC, how did AXZ do this?
Okay, so if anybody was in doubt, the unexpected result was AXIZ winning on day 2 here. But yeah, honestly, even as an AXIZ fan, I'm not quite sure. It felt like it was a combination of factors. AXIZ coming in swinging this split, feeling like they had a faster meta read than a lot of the other teams. Rascal Jesters, well, doing Rascal Jester things because, they always have these slow starts here. I think AXIZ took great advantage of it. Second round robin, J-Real, and I've got to be honest, I don't have that same level of faith that I did, back on day 2.
Yeah, it definitely feels like AXZ kind of hitting what we expected. They had a good early game. Then they've not really performed too much in the rest of the split. But Rascal Jesters, a little bit surprising coming into this one. Formal, do you expect another upset coming through? Do you think AXZ is going to pick up another win, or do you feel like Rascal Jesters kind of got into their flow now?
I think for Rascal Jester's sake, I'm going to be leaning on them that they're going to be hitting their flow because even though they're not technically out just yet, their start was a lot worse than I feel like people may have been expecting coming into this season, which is surprising because it feels like this meta should be stronger for them. Soul looked so strong in spring, hasn't really looked the same here in summer. The team's identity has kind of gone into disarray, and I feel like if they don't bring it back together, if they don't get that redemption against AXIZ, well, then maybe it's time we kind of pack up this Jester team and say, oh, better luck next time.
Yeah, indeed. And if we flip over to talking about expectations, Rascal Jesters haven't had the greatest start, but they also didn't have the greatest start in spring. And we do have a way to have a little look at this. It should be on the screen right now. And we can kind of look. So Rascal Jesters in spring, after their first 8 games, were 4-4. Now they're 3-5. But if we look at some of the other stats, the average game time is pretty similar. Yes, a slightly long game of time in spring. The gold at 15, pretty much exactly the same. The damage share, though, is something that has changed a little bit. In spring, Soul was by far the highest, 33.5% of their damage, whereas now they've dropped to about 27.6, and it's actually Recap that do the most damage on the team.
Yeah, it's odd one, right? Because especially with how bot favored meta this has been, and with how strong Soul looked in spring, you would expect this to be playing right into this team's hands. And it hasn't been the case. They've been apparently a bit more mid-focused. Soul hasn't gotten that same sort of impact. And unlike Sengaku Gaming, who kind of can pull off, Jet popping off perhaps instead of Honey, they just haven't been able to bring out the wins. Rascal Jesters, I mean. So, yeah, the stats might look similar, but I think the big red flag and that big warning sign is right there. Who's doing the damage with this current meta? Why is it coming through Recap and not Soul?
Yeah, and honestly, obviously, the same question pretty much posed to you. Is it that Soul is maybe not doing as well? Is it that maybe Russell just has switched their vibe and they're going for mid? Because to me, it feels like they're still playing for the bot side.
Yeah, they're still trying. I think that's the biggest problem there is not so much that Recap stepping up. If it was Recap stepping up to beat out Soul's numbers, Rascal just would be fine with that. That's exactly what we're seeing happen with Sengoku. Instead, the problem I think is just that Soul's not able to pump out the same levels of damage as we saw in spring so far. And there have been a couple of shaky, questionable lanes from Secret and Soul. As much as we say that they're still one of the best bot duos right now in the LJL, it's not been quite as dominant. And if Rascal Jesters want to continue trying to play through that bot side here, then Soul and Secret kind of need to step up a little bit more. They need to earn that damage share back. If not, I wouldn't hate it if we see Rascal Jesters, pandering towards the mid side a little bit, focusing more for recap.
Yeah, and just to like jump in on that, and the reason why this game in particular kind of becomes almost a trap game, look at the way how AXIZ has been playing. They've had one of the more aggressive bot lanes in this league right now, and if that bot lane from Rascal Jesters doesn't get it together, then yeah, we're going to be walking right back into Upset City because AXIZ, they're not going to be afraid, I feel like. I think they're going to take an very aggressive bot lane. They're going to challenge the struggling bot side of Rascal Jesters, and if we do see that upset we were talking about before, that's going to be where it happens.
Yeah, but I will say with there is a caveat as well. The bot lane has been aggressive, but sometimes too aggressive. Azuka has had some not so good performances recently where the over-aggression has led to a lot of leads being given over to the bot lane. And RMC, do you feel like we kind of talked about them dialing it back? Is that kind of situation you want to see from them? Do you want AXIZ to play the bot lane a little bit slower, or actually do you want them just to turn up again and be like, you know what, let's just all in?
I have mixed feelings about Azuka because coming in, I appreciate that Azuka has been fearless despite his first foray here into the LJL. It worked out early, but specifically last week against CGA and Burning Core, it backfired horrifically. And I think AXIZ needs to strike a fine balance here of how they want Azuka to play. Are they going in with him? Because if they're not, then Azuka needs to dial back. But if they're willing to, then I'm cautiously willing to see Azuka continue playing with this almost reckless abandon here.
But this is the game to do it though. Like this is the time to throw it down. And I know it hasn't worked the past couple times, but surely you can't blow it 3 times in a row, right? I don't know. Maybe that's insanity speaking. However, I like the aggression. I like the fact that they're taking those risks. And even though it didn't work out, when you're a team that's kind of put a little bit lower on the ladder, I sometimes feel like that's how you have to play this game. So I want to see that reckless Azuka. I think if it's going to be any sort of matchup where it can pull off, except for, maybe against V3 where you can do whatever you want and win, this is kind of that matchup to do it. So I hope we do see Azuka take some more risks once again.
Talking about risks, talking about doing whatever you want. Megamin, another one on the list, has played a lot of different champions this season. Not had so much success on a lot of them, but did win on the Corki and the Azir. RMC, where do you want to see this Megamin playstyle? Because we talked a lot about him being an enabler, playing things like Galio, things like the Lissandra. He's played some Seraphine, but do you want him more on those late game scalers back again?
I personally would like to see Megamin more on the support style picks like the Seraphine you mentioned there. And let's see Swamp try and carry a little bit more. I think that we've seen Megamin try and carry, didn't work out. Let's see something new.
Yeah,
yes.
I'd like to see that as well. I'm going to mirror that sentiment and even like almost go, one step further and maybe see a little bit something out of Yellow Yoshi as well in this lineup because
we'll find out. We'll find out very shortly because we are going to go into.
Oh boy, here we go. Yeah, I'm excited to see how this is going to play out, RDM, because I just called you the wrong name. And so that's always a sign that we're going to be in for some shenanigans.
Something's going to happen one way or another, Formal. And we already see the bands coming through, AXIZ, pretty meta bands coming through, Senna, Renata, the Poppy, I think the respect nod to Hachimecha here. Always surprising to see AXIZ banning out when they've got Yellow Yoshi. Rascal Jesters, again, fairly meta for the most part. Zeri, Wukong, Corki here. Nothing too fancy. And Formal, you said you wanted some aggression come out from the bot side. It's not Azuka's pick just yet here, but I think Sanchu picking that Kalista spell is good things early for AXIZ.
Yeah, I like seeing that. I think that they are going to be playing with a similar reckless abandon. And you know what? The best part about, that pick, well, if things get too reckless, I suppose you can always make the save on Azuka as well, should Sanchu be kind of feeling so inclined. Meanwhile, the Ash Hover currently for Rascal Jesters. I feel like this is a safer pick. I'm not too sure on this one. It's not really sort of matching that aggression, and I worry if we want to see Rascal Jester's bot lane step up. Maybe it's because I'm just not a fan of Ash, but I don't know if this is the right way.
Fair enough. I mean, Ash isn't one of those big fancy AD carries who gets their own highlight reels, aside from maybe those snipes, but Ash is a AD carry who's been coming up in prevalence as an answer to Kalista, having that volley to outpoke the Kalista, and the slows as well onto Kalista does heavily limit her ability to hop around, get those spears stack, and you can disengage on your terms. So I think Rascal Jester's adapting to the meta well, learning from what we're seeing internationally. I like the pick, and then pairing that with the Sejuani as well. Rascal Jester's, just with those 2 picks, have all the engage they need. Now they can start loading damage or whatever else they want for this composition.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that level of flexibility that we should be seeing from them. Meanwhile, on the opposite side, Nautilus getting locked in for AXIZ. Not too much of a surprise to see it paired with the Callista as a Malphite hover. I doubt we're going to see that locked in. However, when we're looking at the bot lane already, AXIZ, like, they have the tools to get aggressive again. They have the tools to carry through that bot side, and I don't want to sound too much like a broken record already, but I just feel it. If we're going to see that upset, that's the side where we're going to see it at. And now we get a bit more of a facilitating hover. The top side, it's going to be that Ornn AXIZ. They're looking to be the aggressors in this match.
Yeah, and you can tell that AXIZ right now just assumed that's going to be a Sejuani top. Because I think in the LJL, we haven't really seen Sejuani jungle. So it's a fairly safe bet for them here. Formal, I'm a bit... I don't know if I should be excited or not that we're seeing this much engage come through in the first 5 picks, because it does mean that the teams are likely to just keep clashing in these sort of hit-on style fights here. And for Rascal Jesters, yeah, I was going to say, they're looking for the last pick here. I was wondering if they're going to pick, their mid lane potentially and then try and pinch out the mid pool a little bit for that favorability. But no, they've just gone with support for now. They want to make sure that not only do they have engage, but they also get themselves sort of a peel, a little bit of disengage. And with that, both teams have left their jungle picks to the second rounds.
Yeah, jungle picks actually dropping quite late. However, I don't think it's going to be that large of a deal, only because of the sheer amount of engage we've seen on each side. Obviously, I'd still like to see more of that aggressive edge from AXIZ once more. I would like to see them sort of continue along with that same trend that they have going right now. When I'm looking at Rascal Jesters, the Alistair pick is a bit odd to me because, again, it's more that front line, potentially more engaged. I suppose you can argue it's disengaged, but you're absolutely right. We're kind of gearing up for a matchup where both these teams are looking to go all in as frequently as possible.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if we see the Bel'Veth come through for both these teams here. These are the only 2 junglers, Swamp and Hachamecha, who've actually played the Bel'Veth here in the LJL. And with the amount of engage we already see, that's really good setup. CC is king for Bel'Veth, or queen.
Yeah, CC is... I mean, I feel like it's always going to be the answer no matter which way we go. However, it hasn't really been taken in yet. Instead, we're going to get the Lilia and the Yone to finish off that AXIZ comp. So again, a little bit more dive potential, a little bit more aggression as well. Plus, Lilia can be so annoying to handle. The AXIZ team comp, we now get a complete look at it. It's going to be very fast, very aggressive, and I don't like the Xerath hover. I think this mid lane's going to need a bit of mobility, and there's no mid laner I feel like more mobile in a team fight than Ahri. I would have liked to see that get locked in. LeBlanc, though, can match that early game aggression. Both of these are interesting choices. And the Lissandra, that's stepping away from the fight.
Yeah, I was thinking damage over here, Formal. That's what I would have liked to see. And unfortunately, Lissandra isn't quite that. She does have a pretty good matchup into Yone, though. But Formal, more importantly for Rascal Jesters, that Camille pick also did mean that it will not be a Sejuani top. It's a Sejuani jungle, something that we haven't seen too much of here in the LJL. And honestly, I am worried because the reason why we don't see Sejuani jungle right now a lot, she's kind of slow. She doesn't have the fastest clear. Yes, she's got great ganks, but she relies very heavily on her lanes. And worst of all, she can be punished. She can be invaded. And when I see a Lilia on the other side, Lilia gets to go and take away your jungle camp. She clears faster than you. She outscales you as well. And a late game Lilia, with the sheer amount of percent health and true damage she does, is nothing to scoff at.
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm actually a little bit worried for this Rascal Jester side when we see the full team comps come together because, yes, they drafted a lot of engage tool, but I feel like in this matchup, when they locked in that Camille, I almost feel they've kind of conceded the engage and they're going to be using a lot of it for disengage instead, and they're going to be trying to spread out that map as much as possible and kind of avoid those all-in fights. And I go back to the Ashe pick just being like, okay, that's great. You have the utility, you have the Enchanted Crystal Arrow, but unless the Camille is there to follow it up, I don't really think they're going to have that damage to come through. So I see that more being disengaged. I see them more trying to run away more often than fight. And against a team that we already know likes to play aggressive, they could be playing, I feel like, right into AXIZ's wheelhouse.
No, I fully agree on that. And the thing is, as the game goes later on, that damage factor won't be as big an issue. Ashe, Blip the Rune King, Infinity Edge, that sort of build often will be able to pump out damage later on. It's the early stages. And especially when you're running into Callista Nautilus, on top of that, that's definitely an issue. When I'm thinking the 3v3, when the junglers get involved as well, you've got a Sejuani. Yes, Sejuani has a surprising amount of burst, but against squishier targets, it doesn't feel as impactful. And I just feel like at that level 6, compared to that lilting lullaby, as well as the damage that Lilia just brings, AXZ should be able to win out on this bot side. So
Yep.
would love to see AXZ, focus on that bot side early here. Then you can transition to mid lane after, leave Yellow Yoshi on an island. He's always been able to lose very gracefully there, so he won't need too much help.
Yeah, and I have to agree too. I mean, realistically, like in a lot of ways, it's sort of can Rascal Jester survive the first half of this game? That's what I feel like this is going to come down to, because late game, yes, the Ashes damage will come through. You'll be able to have that Camille split push. It'll be easier to split up the map. It's just whether or not the game is sort of won or lost by the stage when you're looking for that. As already a little cheeky play right here from Swamp, just gets some poke damage onto Eno, does a little dab as they head back into the jungle. Each jungler will be starting on the same side. Not too surprising, as we do expect Swamp to kind of just harass Hachimacha as much as possible in this early and mid game, and the best way to do that is by tracking them sort of side to side.
Yeah, or just outracing them, right? Lilia's clear time is so much faster that if you know where Hachimacha is starting and they do have the ward on that red buff here, you can technically just try and outspeed the Sejuani as much as possible. And it's interesting to note as well that I know for that invade didn't actually drop any vision. So they know where Swamp is starting, but they won't know the details of the clear. Is it going to be a full clear coming through from Lilia or not? Is she maybe going to skip camps, go for early invades? Rascal just doesn't have that information.
Yeah, but because I mean, you'd have to assume, I feel like, just because of the jungle matchup, that you would almost expect Swamp to do a full clear, just because you're going to be able to have that tempo. As Senchu's got to be a little bit careful right here. Ozuka already using a dredge line to make a save, but it's taken so low. Big work done by Soul in this early trade.
And I'm a little bit surprised that that's the way the early trade went here, Formal. Don't get me wrong. I do think Ashe is strong early, with that volley to be able to poke out. But that wasn't just volley poke coming through. That was a hard commit from Soul and Secret. And the Ashe isn't running Comet for the poke. It's not running Hail of Blades for the early fighting here. She's running lethal tempo. So those are extended trades. AXZ just needs to be more careful about when they're picking these trades and how long they want to trade for.
Not to mention, too, you got that vision dropped by Soul as well. So, any question mark on what Swamp was doing was answered as soon as they saw Swamp at the Raptors, saw the sort of creep count, knowing, yep, they are doing that full clear. So now they are aware, all right, timing-wise, we're good for another wave or two in that bot side. We can really start to utilize this early advantage that we got. And the end result is Hachimacha, the slower jungler. Yes, they had to give up 2 camps for it, getting that Rift Herald. Meanwhile, down below, an ambitious dredge line goes against the Access bot side.
Well, Formal, you wanted aggression, right? Is that what you're looking for here? These dredge lines from Ozuka. Okay, I'm glad one of us is happy because I'm getting worried with some of these dredge lines he's going for. And yeah, the great point on the hawk shot coming through from Soul here. I guess that's why they didn't need the wards onto Swamp, when you can just hawk shot and give your team all the information you need. So Hachimecha ends up actually skipping Wolves in order to secure that early scuttle. So that speed that Lilia had there, we are seeing the faster clear come through. But if you're not actually able to invade or get to that scuttle first here, then it kind of doesn't matter. Is it bad for AXZ? No. Lilia still skills up anyway, so it's just some little bit of cheekiness they could get early, which they haven't been able to maximize on.
I think the problem, though, that AXZ is going to run into, though, just because of the way how the clear sort of went down, it does mean we're not going to be seeing that early support from the jungle on the bot side of the map, which is already starting to look a little bit shaky as both bot laners reset. It still is a gold lead on the AXZ side, so I suppose just because the trades hasn't been going their way doesn't necessarily mean the farm has been disastrous, but it's definitely been an interesting game in terms of tone setting thus far, as Hachimacha will continue to be sort of scouted out. Good little read from Megaman right there.
Oh, absolutely. And Rascal Jesters, well, I guess this is their bread and butter, right? Formal, that late game. I had hopes after watching their CGA game, where it's been the fastest game they split, where they had that Caitlyn Ziggs composition. But instead, it feels like, okay, you know what? That was a flash in the pan that decided we'll just go back to that scaling. Yes, it did lose them the games against DFM and Sengoku, but it looked some of the best competition we've seen so far against the top 2 teams. And Rascal Jesters, they're just defaulting back to that.
Yeah, I mean, scaling, though, is sort of the pathway for victory for the Jesters. I'm just surprised to see AXZ kind of play a more passive game. The full clear out of Swamp, I mean, yeah, you have that tempo advantage, but I mean, if they weren't scouted out, I suppose I could say they would have been able to get that Scuttle Crab and maybe have made a play happen, but because they were scouted out, it's just been sort of like ineffective use, I'd say, of what could have been an early jungle advantage. And now it's like the game is kind of starting to flow into just a straight up laning rhythm. I feel this only benefits the Rascal Jester side.
And I wonder how much of that was because the bot lane wasn't in the best position to look to punish, with the Kalista, with the Nautilus there.
Yep.
Unfortunately, Swamp is going to get spotted again. So we're probably not going to get to see that focus into the bot lane that ideally you'd want with a Kalista lane here. And you know what? Like I said, for Swamp's more than happy to farm up. They do have the late game insurance off the Lilia and the Yone, and we haven't touched on the mid lane whatsoever here, but Megaman is pretty much even with Recap for the most part, down a couple of CS, and that's more based on lane state than anything else here. So for AXIZ, I don't think they're fueling the pressure just yet here. If anybody is, it's probably just the bot lane.
We'll see. I mean, Hachimacha is looking for something down below. I'm not sure if they got spotted before because it looked like one of those relic marks actually went to the jungler as opposed to Soul. And if that got noticed by AXIZ, then, well, I think that gank would have been spotted out. If not, it's going to be noticed right now as the Rascal Jesters do move towards that first Ocean Drake.
Yeah, and kind of, even if it wasn't, I'm not sure how effective that gank would be. Cleanse flash still up for Sanctuary here, and Hachimecha not yet level 6, so they didn't really have the long range engage to come through. A good play from Rascal Jesters, having spotted Swamp earlier. They know that, hey, Swamp's not bot side anymore, guys. We can go for this free dragon. And the big question now is, what can Swamp do on the other half of the map? Taking away all the jungles, taking that red buff again, looking for those raptors. That's all well and good, but still no signs of any actual ganks coming through from AXIZ so far.
Yeah, it's actually been a little bit disappointing. Even if you take a look at like the creep score at this stage, it is because Swamp has backed twice compared to Hachimacha only recalling once. But CS actually a pretty large advantage currently in favor of Hachimacha, who you would be expecting, I guess, to be the more passive jungler in this situation, or at least be a bit slower on the tempo side of things. Now, though, they are going to discover that their jungle has been stolen as a play. It's going to break out down below. Dredge line misses, and that's going to burn a flash now. Ozuka is in a bit of trouble. Soul stops autoing as he kind of got hit by the ignite and was a little unsure. That will end the trade for now.
Oh, disaster, Formal. I mean, the fact that the dredge line doesn't land, they could have turned that otherwise. Now Hachimecha level 6 on top.
This could be bad as the Hextech ultimatum does get dropped. Glacial Prison as well. And with the two ultimates, it will be first blood going to the jungler, though, and not the top lane.
Now that, Formal, is efficiency. You love to see it there. As soon as Hachimecha hit level 6, started looking for that. They're fine. Their supports don't do anything, Formal. I mean, if Soul had canceled the recall, I would have been worried.
I mean, yeah, that's where I'm surprised Soul didn't really cancel. I don't know. I would have been tempted to go for that, but I guess cooler heads shall prevail. Maybe not so much around Rift Herald as Swamp is going to try to bully Hachimecha away. That will buy time, though, for Recap and Megaman to kind of make their way down. Shelly, a little bit confused, going deep in the blue side of the map, will eventually refresh.
And that right there, Formal, is why Soul did not stop the recall, because Ozuka was baiting. If Soul cancels the recall right there, AXIZ have the ability to potentially take that Herald. As it stands, though, because Soul recalls and because they realize Soul is coming out, AXIZ don't overstay their welcome. They don't go for it. And here again, it's so easy for Hachimecha at this point. And I know getting the kill here as well. This is first blood. We didn't see any action before this. Is troubling because Camille is sort of one of the anti-tank counters in that top side, right? Especially, if she picks up Divine Sunderer, though I do believe currently we do see more Trinity Force than Divine Sunderer, but if she picks up Divine Sunderer, there's no one who can match this Camille later on in that split push here. So giving that early, actually first blood went to Hachimecha, never mind, not I know. Not perfect, but again, accelerating Camille is never a bad idea.
I still cannot believe the amount of crowd control that both these teams have, but in particular, Rascal Jesters. I mean, everyone's ability just can lock down a team fight, except for maybe Secret. Of course, I'm talking about the ultimates. I mean, Secret has the pulverized headbutt combo, so has their own tools of engagement. But any sort of fight, I feel like, where AXIZ has kind of caught a member or two down, should go Rascal Jester's way. And it goes back to my theory that they're going to be looking to spread out this map, especially as we get later and later into this game. Speaking of a spread out map, however, everyone's kind of congregating down below. Hachimecha thinking about this gank.
Yeah, they're just trying to offset the Herald take, which did happen. Swamp picking up Herald here. Hachimecha just trying to answer cross map, but it's a little bit slow on this particular move. If by the time you hear Herald going down is when you start making the tracks for the cross map, a little bit too late. But Hachimecha, honestly, bot lane, I do think it's the right call here to go for now that you're level 6, now that Soul is level 6 and Secret as well, because now you've got the tankiness, now you've got the CC chain, and Sanctuary can only cleanse one of those multiple CCs coming through.
Well, at the moment, Sanchu can't really cleanse anything because it's still on cooldown, and that probably made that bot side
Even
more
better.
enticing. Speaking of enticing targets, not quite one. Able to hook shot their way to safety.
Yeah, I was wondering if they're going to Lilting Lullaby and full hard commit to this. Young Yoshi's out is back up here, but no, they back up for now. And I think it's the right call. I know still has flash as well. It's a really difficult force. And up to now, Formal, we've still not seen Swamp really go for that gank. At best, we've seen ranging shots, with that swirl seed here, just trying to see whatever you can find, but no hard commits yet. And at the rate they're going, I feel like this bot side for them, Sangchu and Ozuka, you picked this Kalista Nautilus for that early pressure, for that dragon stacking. You didn't get dragon. You didn't get early pressure. And soon enough, I think that's going to be an irrelevant lane. And we're just going to be watching pretty much Megaman and Swamp to be the big carries.
Yeah, which is, again, surprising, and not only when you look at the draft, but it goes back to that early trade, and I wonder if just sort of the call almost then and there, like, you can bring it back, yes, but it sort of had that butterfly effect of, like, that led to sort of a less aggressive play than less aggressive play, but now we see a bit more aggression. Azuka connects with the dredge line, follow through, not quite there straight away. Soul steps forward, but we don't see anyone push forward, and again, Swamp thinks better of it and starts to walk away.
Yeah, and the hawk shot again actually spotted Swamp on the way in as well. So Soul and Secret were at no point really under pressure and threat. I saw Megumin actually looking to roam down. I was thinking for a second, are they going to just brute force this here? 4v2 dive is doable, but now Hachamecha is waiting in the wings, and this is when it becomes kind of dangerous for AXIZ to try and force things. Dragon is up, so maybe that's what both teams are kind of trying to posture over.
Yeah, it should be worth noting, neither top side has teleport available.
Okay.
Dredgeline's going to make contact on the Secret as Soul steps forwards. There's the depth charge. There's the Lullaby. Not quite used
Still
just yet.
holding.
In fact, Soul's actually going to be able to reset a little bit. Now you have a chance for a big Lullaby. 3 members of the Jesters are put to sleep. And with the
Okay.
follow-up
Recap.
engage, Soul is the first one to go down. That is going to be returned on Ozuka as mid laners make their way to the play. Megaman, with a bit of damage, is going to have to back off. Hachamecha was able to find a kill on the backside onto Swamp. And now with the re-engage, here comes the damage.
Stradio
Is going to make their way in. The Glacial Prison doesn't really do too much. Neither did the Frozen Tomb. Either way, Mega Man barely escapes with their own life as the Rascal Jesters back away.
Finally, Formal, we get to see AXIZ make the proactive move, and it results in a rather large fight, a 4v4 in this bot lane. But Rascal Jesters just playing this so well, so patiently as well. Osuka had to hard commit, and Osuka died so early in that fight that it really wasn't an even numbers. A bit of information inequality here. They don't know Hachamecha's here on this engagement. We already kind of said that the 4v3 would have been dicey as it stands. By the time, they actually get onto Soul, they've burnt so much in Secret with the Unbreakable Will. And if you look at the mid lane rotations as well, Recap ends up being the first one down to that bot side, and it makes all the difference. That extra bit of burst converts this to a 3v2. Megumin kind of looking for something in the back end was overambitious a little bit to me.
All right, Shelly, meanwhile, gets dropped in the mid lane, and well, no real fight breaks out, just a lot of posturing for the time being, so we don't get to run back that fight down below just yet. Meanwhile, the 2 top laners, who avoided that initial fray, well, they're continuing to hang out in that top side. Eno continuing to get farm, continuing to pull ahead further and further. Dragon still up for grabs, and it looks like the Jesters will make the first move.
Yeah, and that's literally just off cooldown, being faster for Soul here, having the Enchanted Crystal Arrow, having the Unbreakable Will back up here. But now that chunk onto Recap does make things a little bit riskier. Do AXIZ know that's just Hachamecha there?
They're about to find out because Megaman's going to make their way down, and Hachamecha quite low. Fortunately, well, the dredge line misses, so the bot side for the Rascal Jesters will make their way there. Smite secures it for Hachamecha. Here comes the engage. Megaman tries to fight their way through Secret. Thieves an alleyway into Soul, and with Sanchu coming up, that's going to be the 80 carry gone. Next on the list will be some hamburgers, as Secret will be the second to fall. An easy 2 kills picked up despite losing the dragon.
Okay, big for AXIZ, but I think Rascal Jesters will be fine with that as well. They are getting their dragon stacking on here. Yes, they do lose 2, which is probably 1 more than they wanted to lose. And I want to highlight Megaman here because I've said this before. I feel like AXIZ looks best when Megaman can actually carry as well, take some of that pressure off Sangchu, especially this game with this comp. But hold up, Sangchu.
Sanchu very, very deep. Has to be careful here. There's the Glacial Prison. Here comes the follow-up damage. Flash for flash. Now a bit of kiting, and Hachamecha got close, but has to back away.
Yeah, I thought Sangchu should have been dead to rights there. But yeah, Megaman, going back to my earlier point, being able to chunk out Recap was really what allowed AXIZ to find those 2 kills. Now, okay, so yeah, this is after Megaman gets the chunk. And if you look at Recap actually is the cancel base, and Recap's kind of low here. So Recap can't full commit to this particular fight. Hachimecha already low from solo tanking as well, and when AXIZ collapses in, they just have a simple numbers advantage at this point. Now, Yellow Yoshi is called down with the TP, and that part might have been overkill. Because Yellow Yoshi comes down, Aino gets free time, and the first turret that falls ends up being in favor of Rascal Jesters, despite the fact that AXIZ were the ones, to get that first herald.
Yeah, first tower and possibly second tower as well, because Soul kind of left alone right here on this bot side of the map. That is going to be the bot side tower gone, and that's going to open up a lot of possibilities for this Rascal Jesters team. The hypothesis before was maybe they'd be using a lot of their ultimates as disengage, but with the side lanes now kind of in their control, with AXIZ way into the AXIZ jungle, I feel like those disengage tools all of a sudden become engaged tools, and AXIZ, they're going to have to be very careful with their movements, especially when those deep wards start getting placed down.
Yeah, the vision line needs to start moving as well for both of these teams, really, because for sure, AXIZ need the vision to stop Rascal Jesters from aggressing, but Rascal Jesters also have longer lanes to deal with on the side lanes at this point. So if they want to split push, which they probably want with Aino, they need to make sure that Aino is going to be safe to do so. Formal, I'm personally excited to see those turrets go down because we already said these teams want a team fight. They've got a lot of heavy team fighting on both ends, and once the turrets start to go down, that's when we start to get the bigger fights. As it is, we've already gotten to see, multiple 4v4s, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, it is a good sign. The one thing I always worry about when I see two teams like bank so heavily on engage is they get too paranoid of their opponents and like all of a sudden you just dance all the time and never actually fight. Well, that doesn't seem to be the case right here. Soul gets a lot of free hits down on the Sanchu as Secret starts to step forward. Ozuka's dredge line hits a minion kind of hidden by Shelly, and now comes the re-engage. Secret gets himself to the back line, and here comes the cavalry. Rascal Jesters come pouring in and have already taken Sanchu out just as Recap makes his way up from the bot side. Second one down will be Ozuka as Soul continues to kite and stay away from Megaman. The re-engage now is going to be so dangerous. Yeah, Recap is going to be A-okay with the Frozen Tomb, and that's could be a big fight going for the Rascal Jesters. They might even get the ace. It's all down to Yoshi to escape, but with the slows, with the damage, enough is done. Rascal Jesters win that fight 5-2.
Formal, who needs coffee when the LJL is actually willing to team fight for a change? This is one of your slow games where nothing happens for 25 minutes here. Instead, like you said, Ozuka, throwing out the dredge line, hits a minion, doesn't quite get the engage. And Alistar, I feel like, is a great secondary engage or counter engage champion, right? Once the enemy commits, that's when Alistar looks best. And Secret getting into the back line as well. Sanchu dies at the beginning of this fight. And the moment Sanchu is down, then suddenly, at this point, Swamp's not that big a carry yet. It's just strictly down to Megaman. And Megaman's trying his hardest. You can see immaculately played fight, survives way longer than I thought he would have, actually drawing Aino and forcing Aino to hard commit under that turret here. But one carry isn't enough at this point when you're losing so many members, and Soul is effectively untouched off the beginning. So sure, you don't have as much damage on the Ashe, especially rushing the shield bow instead of something like a Blade of the Ruined King. But if you're ignoring the Ashe and Ashe gets to free fire and your AD carry is dead, it's just a simple numbers game at that point.
I do have to question why AXIZ was a bit that like gung-ho on trying to force the fight right there, considering Flash was down for Sanchu. I am going to think that's an interesting choice because we saw how effective Flash was for Soul in keeping them alive, able to avoid Megaman in that situation. And it just feels risky. I guess that you have like the engage tools and you think, if that hits, maybe we don't need that Flash. But the re-engage potential, even had the dredge line hit, I don't feel like Sanchu survives that fight. And you kind of get a similar situation.
Fair enough, Formona. I'm with you on that here. I don't think it was necessarily the optimal call, even with the Herald there. And Ozuka's kind of throwing it out back out again.
Yeah, why not? Let's just head right back to the mid lane. Teleport's coming through. Dredge line this time does make contact, but it's on Hatamecha, and Secret's like, okay, yeah, I'll follow that up. Oh my goodness, Ozuka almost goes down already. Megaman now going to try to find the flank, but it's only finding the tank line. Call of the Forge God, though, might slow the Rascal Jesters down. It gets 3, but it doesn't get the damage dealers as we see the Glacial Apparition forcing Swap to go gold, and Soul's just biding time before getting those autos down. Megaman's going to be the first target and the last one, as they're the last one standing. Eventually they fall, and once again we have an ace in the mid lane.
Formal, these fights are not the same. The last time, Baron wasn't up, Dragon wasn't up, so all Rascal Jesters gets is kills and breaking the mid outer, but this time it's going to cost them Baron, potentially Dragon as well. I'm not sure if Rascal Jesters actually has enough health to go for that Dragon, but for Rascal Jesters, they're more than happy to take this, and for AXIZ, The definition of insanity is repeating the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. Same thing here. Ozika, you're throwing a hook in onto Hachimecha. What were you expecting? It gives Secret that free engage. And maybe you're expecting, okay, Mega Man, go for that 5-man fate sealed here. You know, maybe you can turn the tides. Look who he actually catches. Secret, Hachimecha. Your 2 tags. I don't care that you almost killed Secret. That Secret's the first one to drop here. Because while you're spending all that time on Secret, Swamp and Sangshu are just getting ripped to shreds on the other half of the map here. And for AXIZ, these are fights they're choosing to engage.
Yeah, look, I know on the desk, a majority of the people on the desk did feel like, hey, AXIZ is a team that can be a little bit too aggressive, and I'm not going to name names on who kind of bit back against it. But all I'm saying is they probably feel a little bit silly right now in wanting that aggression out of AXIZ in this matchup because they've definitely gone too far. And now it's the Rascal Jester's turn to kind of shove their weight around once again. They're going to be going on Ozuka. It wasn't the first target, but there's enough damage there that it doesn't matter. Good little catch as well. The follow-up Glacial Prison will find. I believe that was Swamp, the second member to fall down below. Eno has to go gold, and Mega Man so low. Hook shot. Good dodge from the mid laner out of AXIZ. Able to get safely back under that tower, but it might not matter because the mid lane is wide open.
Yeah, and Baron buff push as well. There's just no way to stop this.
No.
The moment Swamp was down, it was kind of done. Yeah, yeah. It is a little bit, dicey, a little bit iffy here, for AXIZ. Every single move. For AXIZ, it's like they have to dodge everything. If any CC lands, they're dead. Whereas for Rascal Jesters, they're just burning cooldowns, right? Like, oh, it missed? No big deal. We can sit back, rotate back out. And already here, Formal, Baron buff. We still got a minute left. And it's 3,500 gold power play from Rascal Jesters. Yes, we have criticized them for, playing slow early games here, but this is not the Rascal Jesters we saw on day 2. This is a Rascal Jesters that remember from spring with the slow early games, but when they get a lead, that they know how to play with.
Yeah, when the lead is gifted to them by AXIZ picking questionable engages in the mid lane, leading to 2 aces, well, then they really have no excuses but to close out this game as quickly as possible. The first inhib down in the first 22 minutes. They're kind of on pace, it feels like, to break their average game time by about, I'd say, just over, or just under, I should say, 10 minutes at this stage. One more fight, one more of those aces, and Rascal Jesters are going to be getting themselves their 4th win.
True. Yeah. I mean, they already broke the base. So, yeah, one more ace would just be Nexus down at this point here.
Continue along. Looking more towards that top side of the map, we can see a little bit of a push getting set up by the Rascal Jesters side, all members there, and AXIZ could be looking to make their play back up to that top side as well. I mean, they're going to be playing reactionary again. I don't think they're going to get there in time, though, to save this last tier 2.
No, not at all. And great last second usage of that Baron there, wore out on that particular push. Rascal Jesters with the split push in their comfort zone. And Formal, you mentioned, that one more ace coming through. Before this, it had to be AXIZ kind of gifting it with questionable engages here. I think Rascal Jesters are strong enough that they can just brute force and manufacture their own ace at this point here. Even maybe under a turret. Sure, they probably lose members off that turret, but they could do it. And as long as Soul's alive, they can just end.
Yeah, perhaps, although I feel like at this situation, it does look as if they're playing a little bit conservative. They could be waiting for that Mountain Soul, especially if they're going to dive under towers, right? A little extra shielding definitely will not hurt the situation. Yeah. And if AXIZ steps forward and really commits to this fight, it could be a disaster for them again because of the ultimates, because of that crowd control that the Rascal Jesters are going to bring. The zoning game alone is going to force AXIZ's decision-making to be so critical, and we haven't seen them necessarily execute the smartest plan just yet. This is a dire situation. Unless AXIZ can really turn their brains on and turn this one around, I feel like this Dragon Soul is going to be the end of the game.
True. Even if you turn your brains on, I don't know what you're going to do here. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Formal, like you said, if they give over the soul, the dive becomes even easier for these tanks, especially in Hachimecha and Secret. If you don't give it up, then you just get aced. It's kind of game over. If you do fight at it, there's no advantage for you. You're down 9,000 gold in a composition that hasn't really come online. Yellow Yoshi only now hitting level 13, right? Got the first masterwork on himself, but no one else. So AXIZ ideally would like a couple more minutes. They've got exactly one.
I feel like this is where we start talking about that idea of redemption. And for the Rascal Jesters, this has got to feel good in some level. The fact that,
Yeah.
the team that kind of started that catalyst into them not performing as well, that raised the most questions about this team was AXIZ, was that upset back at the start of the season. And now as we look at the situation right now, you're hoping if you're a Rascal Jesters fan, yes, this is the return to normalcy. This is the team that I want to see. This is that dark horse that was supposed to maybe turn heads as the Enchanted Crystal Harrow misses completely. But as we mentioned before, does not matter because in comes Hatchementia regardless. And now here comes the follow through. 4 people caught up in the likes of Recap, and that's just going to lead to a big old meatballs on the tail end. Mega Man is going to try to find a flank onto Soul, but there's enough peel out of secret to keep them alive. Yellow Yoshi will get run down by Eno, and now it's just one Yone versus the world. Mega Man's going to try to escape, going to try to survive. Eno, a bit too fed, gets the ace. That should be the game. Rascal Jesters are going to march their way into victory number 4.
Well, like Formal, you were mentioning, Rascal Jester is gonna definitely feel really strong about this one, really good about this one. Honestly, I think they've improved tremendously in the last couple of days, in the last week, the last 3 days here. But it hasn't necessarily shown because they had such a rough strength of schedule where they faced Sengoku and DFM the last 2 days here. But today, this game, Formal, we do get to see the improvement for them here. And yeah, like J was talking about on the desk, this is par for the course for Rascal Jesters. Round robin 1 doesn't look great, and then they come online and they just play the last 2/3 of the split up.
You know what makes me most excited about that game? Soul finishing it with a 90% kill participation, and Hachimecha finishing it with 100% kill participation. They prioritize that bot lane, and that's where my question mark was. Like, is this team starting to be more mid-focused? Are they going to be starting looking more towards the top side? Nope. It was all bot for them in this one, so they're going to be able to walk away with a victory here. Look, we'll break that down in a bit more after a break when we get our desk completely together, but for now, that is game 1 in the books. Rascal Jesters get themselves the victory.
Rascal Jesters there coming through, picking up a win, which we admittedly did expect to see, but it's good to see them in a little bit of a better form. They're getting some nice team fights going as well. But let's get into the breakdown, guys. Let's get the draft on the screen. Let's have a little look, because a few things coming through that I do want to kind of point out. And the first being, this is the first Sejuani jungle we've had of the split. Formal, are you preferring Sedge jungle to the Sedge top?
I mean, look, the jungle main in me is always going to prefer every character in the jungle to the top. So I can't answer that question without bias. I'm sorry. It's just always true. And I think Hachimecha's performance is going to emphasize that. I said it at the end of that broadcast, the 100% kill participation from the first time we see Sejuani in the jungle. There's a reason why this is where she belongs, where even though your clear might not be as fast, you still have so much pressure that you can provide in that early and mid game just with the sheer amount of crowd control that you have. And they were really, really well utilized, especially on that bot side of the map where we were worried it could be a weaker bot lane perhaps for the Jesters. Not with Sejuani camping it down there, and that was a big reason why they had so much of that early game success.
Yeah, and this obviously isn't TFT, but stacking a load of frail short champs does lead to a lot of CC. Ashe, Sejuani, Lissandra, it's just a lot to deal with, and they were able to really kick off those fights with those big engaged tools, and you love to see it, man. You love to see it. Maybe we'll see a full frail lord come from one team at some point, but onto the flip side, this is the second time we've seen Yone now from Megamin, and to be fair, RMC, I feel like he's pretty good at this champion.
Yeah, I think the one shining light for AXZ this game was Megamin's play. I had said before, AXZ look best when Megamin can help carry. This game, Megamin was pretty much the sole carry because Sanctuary got set so far behind early by the Hachimecha camp that y'all were talking about here. Yeah, Megamin almost carried fights. He was breaking his back. If he had just gotten one kill, I think in some of those early fights, 2 kills in some of the mid fights, it could be a different game, Jeriel. I'm not saying AXZ would have won, but I think it would have been a bit of a closer one between the two of them.
I mean, the problem was just the sheer amount of peel, though, because it really felt like Rascal Jesters were designed to handle a Yone, and I'm not sure if any Yone player could have really broken through an Alistair, a Lissandra, like a Sejuani. Like, that is just so much peel, so much crowd control that it really just was not going to be enough. It's as you were saying in the game, like RMC, you needed 2 carries in these fights. One person just could not do it on their own.
Yeah, and I want to bring attention to one other thing. We talked about the throw, we talked about how CC oriented they are, but they're also pretty good at slowing people down. And people that don't want to be slowed are Kalista. Kalista, it feels like it's been a pick that has kind of been hovering around a lot of the leagues. I know LPL really, really love the Kalista. But do you feel like it's kind of a very niche pick, RMC, or do you feel like, actually this Kalista really is worth picking up and just lock it in? Maybe they just had a good comp against it.
Well, first of all, Kalista and Lilia as well. I think Swamp struggled a lot in those late game fights because Lilia is supposed to prance around these fights. When you're that slow, well, it's like your ankles are effectively broken here. And for the Kalista pick, Jeriel, I think patch 12.12b, there was a nerf to Lucian. And so the Lucian Nami isn't quite as strong globally as it used to be. I still think it's pretty strong, but it's no longer considered sort of the premier early game AD carry. That's now fallen to Kalista. And I'd argue Tristana as well, even though we're not seeing quite as much Tristana. I'd say Tristana and Kalista are probably the 2 best early game champions. So I think the early priority on Kalista, that's perfectly fine. But you need to play around it the same way. And I feel like the LJL has a problem with early game champions. We saw Soul and Secret on Lucian Nami not looking great either here. And if your bot lane isn't one to dominate the early lane phase, that's fine. There are other champions you can play. Ari got banned. Jinx is still a thing. Aphelios is still a thing.
It was weird too because I felt like in a lot of ways Ozuka has that right early game mindset, maybe kind of wired a bit too much with just the constant engages, but the tools were there for that early success. And it's why I don't want to diminish the Kalista just yet. I still think it has a place in the LJL. And if a team can figure out how to best utilize that early aggression, I think they're going to do wonders for this league, especially some of these mid and lower tier teams. If they can get that playstyle down packed, they're going to be fantastic. But we saw the engages, but we never really saw the position for the follow-up, or we saw a hesitation. I mean, I go back to that first trade that we saw in the bot lane, which kind of prevented Swamp from being able to go down there and have that impact, which kind of set off that snowball of seeing Hachimecha being the more impactful jungler, was just because of a desync and sort of when to press forward out of that bot lane. So I'm pro Kalista. I'm anti-AXZ at the end of this game.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's a tough one to pick up. It's not just the easiest champion in the book, and obviously does need some level of assistance. And I feel like Russell Jesters, we talked about how do we feel about them before going into this game. I feel like this was a good step in the right direction. Are you guys train Russell Jesters are back on form 13-1 splits, round robins 2 and 3?
13-1, I think, is a bit tough because Sengoku's really stepped up this
They've already had
particular
the
split.
one, so
True. So I feel it's a bit early to call that for Rascal Justice in this game, but I will say I do think this is the form we expected them to be in. This is the playstyle we expected to see. So definitely big steps in the right direction.
It was good. They won the game they were supposed to win, right? Like they came through, they played well, and they in a draft where it could have easily gone the other way had we seen a bit more synced up. I want to say AXZ side. They won, what I thought was the harder draft between the two. However, they did kind of get that win gifted to them, particularly through the mid game where we saw a lot of questionable engages, and with the team comp designed to kind of punish those, they came out on top. So you know what? Credit to the strategists. They knew AXZ was going to play like that, and they picked the right comp to handle it. Whether or not that momentum continues, I don't want to say 13-1 just yet.
Yeah, well, we'll see how they do prevail. I think they had some good team fighting. I think they showed up a little bit better in this matchup, but Russell is picking up the win that we expected. They're closing out the upset story from AXZ from last time. But we're going to be going to a short break. When we come back, we'll be watching game number 2, the Hawks versus Burning Core, and that's going to be a bit of a scorcher.